Hey guys, Tony here, and today is the day. Today, the Super NES Classic Edition has finally arrived. Guys, if you have not seen my videos lately, if you have not checked out all my reviews, I'm excited. I am pumped up to the max. So today I just thought it would be a very special video to share why I love the Super Nintendo so much. So guys, check out what I have to say about the Super Nintendo. And not just the Super NES Classic Edition. And if you have not subscribed, please do so. I'm releasing a video later today for you guys to check out. And if you want a chance to win a Super NES Classic Edition from me, all you have to do is subscribe, guys. So let's check out my thoughts on the Super Nintendo. Thanks for watching. Okay guys, so I gotta tell you, I'm just sharing from the heart here, and you might ask yourself, what can a 30-something-year-old man say about a game system that's been out since the early 90s, and why does he love this thing so much? Okay guys, you have no idea. Just to give just a brief history of my gaming experience before the Super Nintendo. My parents had an Atari. I was born mid-80s, and that was kind of a hand-me-down. We played Atari. I played Atari since I was 3 or 4 or 5 years old. And I also had a friend down the street who owned a Nintendo, so I got to play the original Nintendo. Didn't get to own one until actually after the Super Nintendo. But I had exposure to the Nintendo system. I had exposure to the Atari system. We had one, and actually the 5200 too. That thing was a piece of junk. And literally I remember playing with a controller and just looking at it and going, what the heck is this thing? But that's the 5200. So we begged my parents to get us one, a Super Nintendo, that is, my brother and I, and we wanted one bad. We actually had friends in school that had a Super Nintendo, and we'd go over to their house and play it, and just blown away. Wow, these are the best graphics I've ever seen. Or, man, gaming can't get much better than this, right? Like, man, just like, this is gaming. This is it. The original Nintendo, there's, Super Nintendo blows it out of the water. So, we finally got one Christmas morning, and I've shared this on some of my reviews. And we just got the plain Jane, like the normal set. Not like what you see here in the background with Mario World. We just got the normal set without Mario World for some reason. I think it was just cheaper, and that's all my parents could afford at the time, and that's fine. I'm not downing them, but they did include 3 things with the Super Nintendo set. Okay, they did go out of their way to rent Super Mario World and Super Mario Kart, and they also gave us a $20 gift certificate to Cinema Plus, our local rental store at the time, and those were the first 2 games I played. Super Mario World, Super Mario Kart. Fell in love, at least on our system, I should say. We played other games before we owned the system, like at a friend's house or whatever, but on our personal system, those were the first 2 games we played. So growing up, we got some other games too. My brother was into fighting games, Mortal Kombat. He was into sports games, Tecmo Super Bowl. Stanley Cup was one of his favorites. And Super Bases Loaded. Super Bases Loaded actually is probably my second or third favorite sports game of all time. Probably behind Blitz, NFL Blitz, and Blades of Steel. Blades of Steel. And, we rented a ton of games. Our rental store, they literally had anything that you'd want to play. Literally. All the hits, all the hits, non-popular games. For some reason, they would buy every single Super Nintendo game that came out. So we were lucky. And my brother, he would actually rent games like Zelda and Top Gear back here, and just all sorts of games. Contra 3, Metroid, Super Metroid a little bit later. But yeah, we would be exposed by these games that we rented. We'd also borrow games from our friends. Later on in the Super Nintendo's lifespan, I would borrow a lot of RPGs. I'll get to RPGs in here in a second. And, early on we were exposed to the classics. Pilot Wings, Sim City. Oh my gosh, love Sim City. F-Zero. I did a review on that. Super Mario World. All that. Sim City, guys, is awesome on the Super Nintendo. It's probably the best non-PC port of the game, in my opinion. It's a great game. Lemmings was another great title that we played to death. Like, we should have bought that game. That's how much we rented it. And just so many good games that we played. My brother, he was really good, like I said earlier, at Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat 2 was his game, and I could not beat him. I was Liu Kang. That was my main. Still is. And he would just beat me with anybody. Okay? Yeah. And he kind of stepped away from the Super Nintendo a little bit. He still played it, but not as much. Mortal Kombat, Doom, things like that. Wolfenstein 3D. We'd borrow that from a friend. And he would play Street Fighter 2, games like that. Now, we only had the one, and this is the same one that we got for Christmas morning. I'm very, very fortunate to still have this system. It's in rough shape, but it works. It has the yellow, the very, very common yellow plastic effect that happens to the Super Nintendos from this era. Certain exposure to light, and this cheap plastic does that, not smokers, okay? Smokers can add to it, but that's how that happens. That if you ever see a Super Nintendo it's yellow, it's because of the plastic and the light. Okay, Nintendo was a little cheap. I have, seen some Super Nintendos that are pristine. I have owned a couple that were pristine without this yellowish, but I love this. I love having this, regardless of what shape it's in. But enough about that. Now, let's just talk about what shaped me as a gamer. Zelda, A Link to the Past. The Legend of Zelda, that was probably my first true, I'm going to say it's not really an RPG, but my first true RPG experience. Fantasy, adventure type experience on any console, really. And that kind of evolved. I wanted to play more games like that. So I started to explore at my local rental store. Final Fantasy II. That's the very first Final Fantasy game that I've ever played. And I played that thing and I was blown away. I loved the story. And then I rented Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. And the game kind of sucks, but at the time, as a kid, it was actually kind of fun. I enjoyed it. It was cool. I was like, man, this is kind of like Zelda. With Final Fantasy II elements. So I liked it. It was fun. And it was meant to be an easier RPG, by the way. And then I rented Final Fantasy III. Great game. Great game. I did a review of it. Borrowed it from my friend all the time, Mitch. And it would go on from there. Played great games. Rented great games. Lufia 1. Lufia 2. Breath of Fire 1. Breath of Fire 2. Oh, and a little game called Chrono Trigger. I rented that. I remember renting that for the very first time. And just like, oh man, this looks radical. Like looking at the cover with Chrono going up, and he has the flame sword, and I was just kind of like, yeah, I gotta play this game because I was on an RPG kick, and then when I played that game, ooh boy, blown away, guys, blown away. And I just, ever since then, that's my favorite game of all time. And I'd play games like Earthbound. My friend Mitch introduced that to me. And Harvest Moon. Guys, Harvest Moon! The original Harvest Moon is so good. And it just kind of shaped me. And all these great RPGs, I still love, in my opinion, that era, that 16-bit era that came out of the Super Nintendo, and I would actually include some Sega Genesis games in there too, like Phantasy Star 4, Shining Force 1 and 2. And that era, that's the best time, that's the golden age of RPGs. And I lived through it and I loved it. Secret of Mana, I'll include that in there too. And just, it made me want to play more and more RPGs. And it hooked me as a Final Fantasy fan, a Square fan, and eventually into a Square Enix fan. And I just fell in love with RPGs because of that era. And, you know, like Final Fantasy VII was looming. I played that. And I don't know if I would like Final Fantasy VII if it wasn't for the Super Nintendo and all those great RPGs. Now, let's just mention a few other games that I love to death. Mario Kart, great. I play that with my brother, my friends, multiplayer. Yoshi's Island, great platformer. Mario World, I've already kind of talked about that, but that was the game that I would play constantly. I could play that today, you know, without an issue, and have a lot of fun with it. What else? What up? Contra 3. A lot of games that are on the Super NES Classic Edition. I'd borrow that from my buddy Eric and play it. Just so many. Mega Man X. And I never really played X2 and X3 until later. And I got it on the collection, the PlayStation 2 collection. And just so many great games, guys. It's what really, in my opinion, revolutionized gaming. It's what made gaming what it is today. I mean, the Super Nintendo controller. This became standard. Alright, and just, it's, in my opinion, the best controller that's ever been made, besides maybe the PlayStation 2, or the DualShock model, I guess, if you will. But other great things, like the Super Game Boy, it's so good. So good. I mean, you can play Pokemon, you can play Link's Awakening, you name it. And it had, you know, some games were specially made to be played on the Game Boy, Super Game Boy. Also the Super Scope. We had a Super Scope back in the day. I have one today as well, and we had one. We love that stupid thing. It's a piece of junk. It's nothing like the Zapper. And, you know, we played that stupid Super Scope, you know, 6-in-1 game, and we'd be entertained for hours. You know, just great stuff. Mario All-Stars was great, because at the time we never got Mario 2, the real Mario 2. And to play that, it's like, oh, this game is only in Japan. Wow. You know, and just all the good Mario games that came out on the system. Guys, I can't speak, you know, any more highly of the Super Nintendo. This, if you want a true 90s retro system, it's this and the Sega Genesis. This, and don't get me wrong, I love the PlayStation, I love the N64, the Saturn, I think doesn't get enough love, even the Sega CD, 32X, I don't know about that one. I love the 32X, but don't get me wrong, you know, this and the Sega are the 90s to me. And I love all those other systems, but guys, if I had to just pick one system that was my favorite of all time, and all-time favorites are dumb. Those lists, like top 10 lists, are dumb. I know that. But just how special this system is to me. That's why I went bonkers over all the game reviews. And that's why I went bonkers when, you know, it was initially announced. And guys, it truly is a very special item, a very special system in my life. And to think that I had this, and I actually modded this to play Famicom games, Super Famicom games. To think that I had this game system, you know, when I graduated from elementary school to high school, from high school to college. College, I graduated and I got my first job, and I met my soon-to-be wife, and all these you know, great life events. And you know, this has just been, it's just a you know, belonging. I get that, okay, but it's still cool to just say I have this. This is from my childhood, and it's just neat to have this in my possession still. If that makes any sense. And guys, I hope you, I'm going to close here, I hope that you will get to experience the Super Nintendo through the Super Nintendo Classic Edition. If you have not played any of these games before, and guys, I hope you fall in love with this thing like I have. It's my favorite Nintendo product of all time. It cannot be topped in my opinion. And yeah, the design's clunky and crappy, but I still love it. It screams 90s to me, and I love the 90s. So I hope you guys get a Super Nintendo Classic Edition. If not, track one of these down. It'll be worth it. It'll be worth your time to do that. Track down some of these games. Okay, if I had to boil it down to 3 games, you need to get Super Mario World, A Link to the Past, and debatably Mario Kart or like Donkey Kong Country. Okay, so guys, I'm going to leave it at that. Kind of ends my Super Nintendo month. And again, go out there and get that Super Nintendo. Go out there and get that Super Nintendo Classic Edition. Guys, thanks for watching. I know this was kind of a different video, but I wanted to release it on September 29th, the day the Super Nintendo Classic Edition is out. So, guys, thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed to me, please do so. That's going to put you in the running for a Super NES Classic Edition from me. Details are coming out soon, guys. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.